It's wild, isn't it, how just a tiny change in, like, your tone of voice or how you're standing can suddenly make people actually listen to you. Like, ideas hit harder, you get your point across.
Yeah, for sure. It is interesting how these subtle things can have a huge effect on how you come across and what you can achieve.
And that is exactly what we're diving into today.
Exactly.
So you found this amazing conversation on The Diary of a CEO, right?
Hmm.
With Vinh Giang. He's a communication expert.
He is, yeah.
And our goal is to basically pull out those nuggets of wisdom, those actionable steps that we can, apply to our own lives. So, everyone listening can become a more confident and effective communicator.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something that, we all kind of struggle with at times, right? Like, how do we really get our point across? How do we connect with people? So Vinh's conversation, it covers so much ground. We're going to be looking at, understanding and overcoming some of those common communication challenges we all face, recognizing how important both our voice and our physical presence are. And then also, we're going to be exploring some practical techniques for improvement. Like, how do we actually get better at this stuff?
It's great stuff.
Right. Not just theory, but like, how do we put this into action?
Yeah.
And of course, ultimately, the goal is to develop that self-awareness so we can understand how we come across to others.
Because otherwise you don't even know what to fix.
Exactly. So one of the things that I thought was so cool that Vinh talked about, I don't even know how to introduce it other than to just say it.
Yeah.
He talked about viewing your voice as a musical instrument, not just as a tool for conveying information.
Oh, yeah.
He actually talked about his experience with his vocal teacher, Miss Stanley, and it really transformed how he thought about his own voice.
Well, I mean, it's like, think about it. A tool just has a job to do, right?
Yeah.
But an instrument has the potential for like so much more.
Right. Nuance, expression, like a musician.
Exactly. And like they practice all the time to get it just right so they can make people feel certain emotions.
And it made me think, like, wow, have I just been using my voice in such a flat, one-dimensional way?
It is fascinating to kind of think about how our voices trigger these subconscious responses based on how we use them.
And, Vinh even tells this great story where Miss Stanley sits down at the piano and plays a single key.
Uh-huh.
And then she transitions that single key into this beautiful melody.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful illustration of how, the same basic element can create such completely different emotional experiences.
Yeah.
And that's our voice, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it ties back to what we were saying at the beginning about negotiating reality through communication. By really understanding how to use your voice like an instrument, understanding its full range, you gain so much more control over how your message lands.
Right. Because suddenly you can control how people are actually receiving that message and the influence you have.
Okay, so here's another really interesting point that Vinh made. And I think this one is, something that a lot of people can relate to. He talked about how sometimes even if you were technically brilliant, even if you're a 10 out of 10 in terms of your skills, it's not always enough.
Yeah.
He actually gave this example of someone who was technically brilliant, but their communication skills were, maybe like a 3 out of 10.
That's a big gap.
It is.
Yeah.
And so it kind of begs the question, right? Like,
Yeah.
how is anyone supposed to see your value? How are they going to recognize your brilliance if you can't actually express it, articulate it, connect with them on that level?
Totally. Like, how is your worth going to be recognized if you can't explain it well?
Right. And I think to illustrate this, Vinh uses the example of Bloody Brad.
Oh, Bloody Brad. Yeah.
We all know Bloody Brad,
Yeah.
right? It's a person who might not be the smartest person in the room, but they just have this way of presenting their ideas.
They're so good at building relationships, and they're likable. You want to work with them.
Exactly. And, in this example, Bloody Brad ends up getting the promotion. And so it's not to say that technical skills aren't important.
No.
But it's to say that there's this threshold where at a certain point, if you can't communicate it effectively, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And Vinh makes this really powerful statement. He says, it's not other people's job to just see your brilliance. It's your responsibility to make sure you can communicate that value clearly.
You got to make it clear.
And I think that's a really big mindset shift for some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, you might be sitting there thinking, well, they should just know. But that's not how it works.
Oh, you have to own that. Yeah.
You have to own it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how we can actually start getting better at this stuff.
Right.
Vinh has this 3-step process that he calls record and review.
Okay.
And I know it sounds pretty simple, but the way he breaks it down is actually really helpful.
Well, yeah, because it gives you this way to actually see what you're doing and where you can improve.
Exactly. So first step, obviously, is recording yourself. Vin suggests making a 5-minute video
5 minutes.
of
Okay.
just you talking about something, fairly simple. And actually he even says you can just Google conversation starters.
That makes it easy.
Right. So you don't even have to think about what to talk about.
Right.
And here's the thing. He says stand up while you're recording.
Oh, interesting.
So why do you think that is?
I mean, I guess when you stand up, you're naturally more engaged, right?
Yeah.
More energy. Maybe it's like how you'd be in a real presentation or conversation.
More dynamic.
Exactly. And I think it also, it affects your breathing, maybe even the quality of your voice. It just creates a more representative sample of how you typically communicate.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your recording. Now, here's the thing. Vin recommends waiting a full day before you actually watch or listen to it.
A whole day. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, why do you think he suggests that?
To not be so hard on yourself, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you record yourself, I mean, you're immediately like, oh, that was awful.
I hate how I sound. I hate how I look.
All those things.
Yeah.
But if you give it a day, maybe you can look at it with a little more objectivity.
And he breaks down the review process into 3 parts. The first is what he calls the auditory review.
Auditory review.
So you listen to the recording, but you do it with your eyes closed. And the goal here is to really focus on the sound of your voice.
Oh.
So what kinds of things are you listening for?
I guess things like how fast you're talking, are you a mile a minute?
Right. Rate of speech?
Yeah, rate of speech, how loud are you? Am I mumbling? Am I shouting?
Oh,
Volume.
right.
And the emotion in your voice. I don't even know what the word for that is.
Tonality.
Tonality, yeah. Like, is it interesting or is it just monotone?
Yeah. Are you putting people to sleep?
Yeah, exactly. And pauses.
Right. Pauses are so important.
Are you using them effectively or are you just, filling the space with junk?
Exactly. The second part of the review is visual. This time you watch the recording, but the sound is off.
Silent movie time.
Yeah, exactly. So now you're just looking at your body language.
Okay.
What kinds of things are you paying attention to?
Let's see. Hand gestures. Definitely. Am I using my hands effectively?
He talks about the power sphere.
Power sphere. Yeah, I remember that. That's the space, like from your belly button up to your eyes.
Yep, that's the sweet spot for hand gestures.
Makes you look more confident, more executive presence, I think he called it.
Exactly. And then also, any nervous tics or just repetitive movements that you're not even aware of.
Oh, man. I probably have a bunch of those.
We all do. It's just about becoming aware of them so we can start to, minimize them.
Right.
And then just your overall physical presence. Like, do you look confident and engaged, or are you kind of slumped over, looking bored?
Yeah. It's so interesting to watch yourself and see what you're actually doing.
Okay, and then the third part of the review, I think this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Get a transcript of your recording.
Like written down.
Written down, yeah.
Whoa.
But here's the catch.
Yeah.
Make sure the transcript includes all those filler words, the ums, the lice, the likes.
Oh, no, that sounds painful.
It can be, but it's also really eye-opening.
Yeah, I guess you don't really realize how much you say those words until you see them all written down.
Exactly. And it shows you, where you're rambling, where you're repeating yourself, where you're cluttering up your speech.
Right.
And Vince's advice, he says, don't try to fix everything at once. Just pick one thing each week.
Yeah, that's smart.
He calls it kaizen. It's a Japanese term.
Kaizen.
It's this idea of, relentless small improvements over time.
I like that. Less overwhelming.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about those areas that we might want to focus on for improvement. Vin breaks down what he calls the 5 core vocal foundations.
5.
The first one is melody. And this is essentially the variety in your pitch.
Melody. Okay.
So do you remember that experiment he did with the piano music?
Oh, yeah. He showed how different notes make you feel different things.
Exactly. And it's the same with your voice.
Oh, I see.
Like a musician uses different notes to create a mood, to evoke a certain emotion.
Right.
And your voice does the same thing.
So like a more varied pitch is going to be more interesting to listen to.
Exactly. And it's not just about being interesting, it's also about conveying emotion more effectively.
Right. And making people remember what you're saying.
Vin even suggests this thing called the siren technique to help people explore their vocal range.
Siren technique, like woo woo woo.
Kinda, yeah.
What, you just make siren noises?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically making this continuous sound, starting from your lowest comfortable pitch and going all the way up to your highest, and then back down again.
Oh, I see.
And it helps you to become more aware of your range so you can use it more effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so the second foundation is rate of speech.
How fast you talk.
Exactly. And Vin puts this on a scale of 0 to 10.
Okay.
0 being painfully slow, 10 being like an auctioneer.
Right, like super fast.
He says most people fall somewhere between a 3 and a 7,
Okay.
but the key is to vary your pace. So you can deliberately slow down to emphasize something important, which he calls an auditory highlight.
Ah, okay. Like bolding a word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you can speed up a little bit for information that's less crucial or just to convey a sense of energy.
Right, like changing things up.
Vin suggests aiming for around 150 to 180 words per minute.
Okay.
But it's really more about finding a pace that's comfortable for you and your audience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, the third foundation is volume.
Volume, okay.
And again, he uses a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
And he emphasizes that volume is the carrier for all the other foundations.
Mhm.
Like, if you can't hear someone, it doesn't matter how interesting their melody is or how varied their pace is,
Right.
you're not going to get the message.
Exactly.
But he also cautions against consistently speaking too quietly.
Yeah, I guess that can make you seem unsure of yourself.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, always speaking loudly
Mm.
can come across as aggressive.
Yeah.
So it's really about finding that balance.
Right, and using volume strategically, like if you're trying to make an important point,
I guess
or
that's
if you're sharing something personal.
The fourth foundation is tonality,
Tonality.
which is basically the emotion in your voice.
Okay.
And Vin makes this really interesting point. He says that your face is like the remote control for adding emotion to your voice.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So, if you want your voice to sound happy, you have to smile.
I guess it's like how our facial expressions are connected to how we're feeling.
Exactly. And then when people see you smiling, their brains actually mirror that emotion,
Mm.
even if they don't realize it. It's this thing called the mirror neuron effect.
Mirror neuron effect. That's cool.
And he actually did this little demonstration where he said a sentence, very simple sentence, but he did it with different facial expressions.
Like what? Happy, sad, angry.
Yeah, all of those.
I bet it sounded totally different.
It did. And it was amazing to hear how much his tone of voice changed just by changing his facial expression.
Wow.
And he also talked about how, especially for men, there's this kind of societal pressure to not be too emotional.
Yeah.
And he thinks that that can actually be really detrimental to communication.
It's like we're taught to suppress it,
Yeah.
but it makes you less engaging.
Yeah.
That's real, less human.
Okay. And then the fifth foundation, the final one, is the pause.
The pause. Okay.
And Vin emphasizes that a well-placed pause can actually intensify the emotion that came before it.
Oh, interesting.
And it gives the listener time to process what you just said.
Right, like to let it sink in.
He even compares it to music.
Oh, yeah, like the silence after a really dramatic chord.
Exactly. And he says that a lot of nervous speakers, they tend to rush through everything.
I do that.
We all do, yeah.
Hmm.
But it actually diminishes the impact of your message.
It's like you're not giving your ideas enough space to breathe.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So moving away from the individual elements of voice, Vin introduces this broader concept of vocal image.
The vocal image.
And he compares it to visual image, like how we present ourselves visually.
Okay.
So, just like your clothes and your hairstyle create a first impression, your voice does the same thing.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's your vocal image.
Right.
And he says that, when you meet someone, you make certain assumptions based on how they look.
Yeah.
But then the moment they start speaking, those assumptions can either be reinforced or completely challenged.
Oh, that's so true. Like you might see someone and think, oh, they seem really friendly,
Right.
but then they start talking and their voice is like super cold and distant.
And it throws you off, right?
Oh, really?
So now let's talk about body language.
Okay.
Specifically, hand gestures and our overall physical presence. Vin introduces this idea of the power sphere.
Power sphere. That's the belly button to the eyes, right?
Exactly. And he says that, when you gesture within that space, it just makes you look more confident.
More presence, yeah. Like you're claiming your space.
Exactly. And then he goes on to describe 5 foundational hand gestures that were identified by Virginia Satter.
Oh, Oh, yeah, I've heard of her.
The first one is called a plicator.
Plicator.
And this is where your palms are facing upwards and outwards.
Okay.
And it generally conveys a sense of openness, sincerity, maybe even a little bit of vulnerability.
Right. Like, I'm not a threat.
Exactly. Then you've got the leveler.
Leveler.
And this is where your palms are facing downwards.
Okay.
And this tends to convey a sense of authority, control.
More assertive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there's the blamer.
Blamer. Oh, I know what that one is.
That's the pointing gesture.
Yeah.
Although Vin does point out that there's a softer version where you use your whole hand instead of just your finger.
Oh, okay. I see.
So it's still direct, but it's not quite as aggressive.
Right. Like, you're still making a point, but you're not, attacking anyone.
Exactly. And then you've got the computer or the thinker gesture.
Computer thinker.
And this is where you have one arm tucked under your armpit and your other hand is resting at your chin.
Okay.
And this one, generally signals that you're thinking, processing information.
Yeah. Like, you're deep in thought.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is the distractor.
Distractor. Okay.
And this is any kind of sudden movement that breaks the pattern.
Oh, interesting. Like a clap or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was for when you've lost people's attention.
Exactly.
Okay, wake up.
Okay. So Veen also talks about the importance of storytelling and communication.
Storytelling.
And he mentions these 4 key elements that make a good story. You've got the hook, the struggle, the breakthrough, and then the application.
The application, yeah, that's the takeaway, right? Like, what's the point of the story?
Literally.
Yeah.
And he said that's the most important part.
Because otherwise it's just, a story.
It's entertainment, but it's not necessarily going to stick with people.
Right. You need that takeaway, something to learn from it.
He makes this distinction between effective storytelling, which includes the application, and just, giving a list of tips.
Yeah, like a list of tips is boring.
A story is much more engaging.
It's memorable, and it actually makes you feel something.
Okay, now let's talk about social interactions.
Yeah.
Vin has this really fun concept called Halo Buffalo that he uses to initiate conversations.
Halo Buffalo. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's basically having 3 different types of conversation starters in your back pocket.
Okay.
Something high energy, something related to your surroundings, and something more personal.
Oh, okay. So like high, buff, low.
Exactly.
I like it. It's catchy.
And the key, he says, is to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable, to share something real about yourself.
That's where the connection comes in.
Exactly. And then, for navigating small talk, he suggests using a 3-2-1 framework.
3, 2, 1. Okay.
So you think of 3 points you could make about a topic,
Okay.
or 2 different perspectives, or 1 key takeaway you can share.
So it's about being concise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it prevents you from, rambling on and on.
Right.
He also suggests having a few go-to questions that you can ask.
Like, what do you do for fun or something?
Yeah, something open-ended like that.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have handling interruptions.
Interruptions.
Vin says that people with low vocal and physical presence are more likely to be interrupted.
Oh, that makes sense. Like, if you're not commanding attention, people are more likely to just jump in.
Exactly. So he suggests standing up in meetings.
Standing up.
It just gives you more presence.
Literally, it takes up more space.
And then he also mentions this idea of priming the conversation.
Priming. Okay.
Basically, you just set expectations at the beginning.
Oh, okay. I see.
So, you might say something like, I have a few points I'd like to share, so if you could just give me 5 minutes, and then we can open it up for discussion.
Right. So people know what to expect.
Exactly. And then when it comes to handling critiques or differing opinions, Vin says to use the phrase yes and
Yes, and.
instead of yes but.
Oh, okay. I get it.
It's a subtle difference, but it can really change the tone of the conversation.
Yes, but kind of shuts the other person down.
Exactly. Like you're negating their point.
Right. Whereas yes, and acknowledges what they're saying and then builds on it.
It's much more collaborative.
And it keeps the conversation flowing.
Vin actually even referenced some neuroscience research that suggests disagreement when it's framed as a contradiction, like yes, but
Yeah.
it can actually trigger a negative response in the brain.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it just makes it harder to have a productive dialogue.
That makes sense.
Okay, so obviously a lot of our communication these days happens online, especially on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
And Vin emphasizes that those 5 core vocal foundations that we talked about,
Yeah.
they're even more important online
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
because, you're not physically present.
Right.
So your voice carries a lot more weight.
It has to do all the work, basically.
Exactly. And, he recommends trying to appear in what he calls the personal and social space on Zoom.
Personal and social space. Okay.
So that's showing your torso, maybe a bit of your background.
Not just your face, like super close up.
Right, because it just helps to create a more natural feeling.
Yeah, it feels more like you're actually in the same room with someone.
He also has some really good tips for improving your online presence in general, like investing in good lighting.
Lighting, yeah.
Makes a big difference.
He specifically recommends a 3-point lighting setup.
3-point.
Yeah, so you have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight.
Okay.
And then also, good quality webcam.
Yeah.
Aim for at least 1080p.
Okay.
And then an external microphone. Because the audio quality on most laptops is not great.
It's true.
It is.
Makes you sound so much more professional. Okay, so I think something that a lot of people struggle with when they start trying to consciously change how they communicate is self-doubt.
Yeah,
Like, oh, this just doesn't feel like me.
totally.
And Vin addresses that directly. He says that it's probably not that it doesn't feel like you, it just feels unfamiliar.
Ah, that's a good distinction.
Right, because it's new.
It's like anything new you try, it feels weird at first.
Exactly. And he talks about this concept of contextual confidence.
Contextual confidence.
So the idea is that, as you master these core communication skills, you actually start to feel more confident in all areas of your life.
Oh, that makes sense. It spills over.
Right, because communication is such a fundamental part of everything we do.
Yeah, we're always communicating, whether we realize it or not.
And Vin actually shares his own personal story about how he used to be the invisible kid.
The invisible kid.
Yeah, and how he even felt like he was hitting this bamboo ceiling in his career because of his communication style.
Oh, wow.
But he was able to overcome that through just dedicated effort and a belief that he could change.
That's really inspiring.
It is. It shows you that, no matter where you're starting from, you can make progress.
Right.
So to wrap things up, Vin gives some advice on how to actually implement these changes.
Okay.
And he says, start practicing with what he calls neutral ears.
Neutral ears, okay.
So basically that means people you don't know well.
Oh, okay. Like strangers.
Yeah, because there's less pressure.
You're not worried about what they're going to think.
Exactly. And then, he says, once you feel a little more comfortable, you can start incorporating these changes with your close friends and family, your colleagues.
Right.
But be upfront with them.
Yeah. Like, hey, I'm working on this, so bear with me.
Exactly. And you could even invite them to join you on this journey.
That's a good idea. It's always more fun to learn with other people.
So I think the core message that comes from Vinh Giang's insights is that your ability to communicate is this incredibly powerful tool.
I'd like a superpower.
It is. And it's something that you can constantly be developing and refining.
Right. Like any skill, it takes practice.
Exactly. And Vin's challenge to everyone is to actually implement that record and review process that we talked about and just pick one small thing to focus on this week.
One small thing.
Kaizen, remember.
Relentless improvement.
And here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
What small shift in your communication, starting today, could actually unlock a whole new level of influence for you
Oh, wow.
and help you to create the reality you desire?
That's a good one.
And now, as is tradition here on the Deep Dive, our guest from the previous session left a question for our current subject.
Oh, right.
And the question is this: what is one thing that you know to be true, even though you can't definitively prove it, that in the world we live in right now allows you to negotiate whatever reality you desire?
That's a deep one.
It is. And Vin, his response to that question was really powerful. He talked about the power of belief.